Thank you very much, and I'm truly delighted to have the chance to be here and to participate in this very special event. Last night, Audrey McLaughlin, who's always been one of my heroes in politics, and believe it or not, you can actually have political heroes who are not in the same political party from which you come, made a really interesting point. She said, we don't really have to discuss the nature of the issue. We know what the issue is. We really have to start talking about solutions. And I think she made a very important and critical point. But I want to talk to you about some of the human realities and how they manifest themselves, and why I think we can be doing better as a country and in our various communities on this whole issue of poverty and exclusion, and why I actually think that of all the things we need to do in Canada, poverty eradication is job one. Where I live, Kingston, Ontario, we have a population of 120,000, and 3,810 kids depend on the schools for breakfast every morning because there's none at home. In our schools, poverty manifests itself with kids who bring lunch boxes which are empty, or who say at lunchtime they forgot their lunch, when in fact there wasn't any lunch to begin with for them to bring. In Ontario today, if you're a hard-working employee of the Crown working in the welfare services, either for a municipality or the province, the Ontario Works Book of Rules by which you have to evaluate every one of your cases only has 800 rules in it. Rules, right? So you can be the best, most dependable, most committed, professional, competent, caring, empathetic individual trying to help others as part of the system. But the system, by definition, weighs you down. During some of the most remarkable increases in economic growth across the country, we've had a massive expansion of food banks. One would assume, if you take the trickle-down view of economics, that if the economy's getting bigger, it should be getting better. But in fact, right across Canada, the gap is getting larger. And the pressures on those at the bottom end are becoming more intense. So we know that 10% of Canadians are living in poverty. That is, depending on how you count, 3 to 4 million. We know that in rural areas, the number is substantially higher. It's about 15%. And in rural areas, because those events are not often, those realities aren't punctuated by gunfire that makes it on the evening news, it's actually more silent and more secret, and in that context, more deadly. We know, too, that across every continuum of what constitutes a happy and fulfilled life, poverty is the best predictor of things that turn out badly. Our prisons are filled with a population. If you accept that 10 to 15% of our population are living beneath the poverty line, why is 85 to 90% of Her Majesty's guests in our prisons, and I've got 7 prisons in Kingston within a 50-mile radius of downtown, why are they all from the 10 or 15% who live beneath the poverty line? Why are people who get admitted to hospitals sooner and earlier with more serious and debilitating diseases, both dental and others, remarkably from the lower income population? Why do they die younger? Why do they drop out of school first? Why do they get into substance abuse and related issues more quickly? The answer is because inclusion is not, and I put this to you as one of the things you may want to reflect upon today, it's not actually just about emotion and heart and caring. Segal's rule number 1 about inclusion. When they say it's the principle and not the money, it's the money. Take it to the bank. Because the way in which communities get along is defined by people having the chance to participate in the life of that community. And poverty is a huge, massive barrier to that participation. So I want to thank the Minister and the government and your Legislative Assembly for making this initiative happen, and all of you for finding the time to be here. I think the notion of pausing from day-to-day management of programs and caseloads and client groups to ask whether we can do this better, is there some way we can reflect together on new initiatives that will make a better difference, is very courageous. We have a problem in social policy in this country, which is referred to by behavioral economists and political scientists as path dependency. And what that means is, for many in government, of all political affiliations, I hasten to add, and for many in the public service, despite their best intentions, it is easy to go back and forth in the same rut. Sometimes faster, sometimes slower, sometimes with your wheel turned a little bit in one direction or another, than it is to summon the energy to get out of that rut and start a new furrow, start a new direction. And the fact that going back and forth in that same rut gets you further and further from the sun and deeper is interesting, but actually not material because you're powerless to do anything about it. I think this process holds immense promise of getting out of one rut and starting a new path that is a bit more constructive and very much reflective of the best. And I want to be clear that I'm not saying to you that I'm from Ottawa and I'm here to help. That goes right along with lines like the check is in the mail and I'll respect you in the morning. I don't think it's appropriate. In fact, in some respects, I'm here to make the case for eradicating poverty being job one, to make the case why that is. And before we get carried away with what is poverty, let's understand one simple reality. Whether you take StatsCan's low-income cutoff, which is basically half the median income in any community, or whether you take the so-called market basket measure used by the Fraser Institute, which is a lot less generous, in every province and territory except for Newfoundland and Labrador, the average Canadian family on welfare is earning between $19,000 to $11,000 less than the poverty line. Right? Just so we're clear. So before we get into, well, there's a million definitions of poverty, the folks who give you the complexity so as to keep you from making straightforward solutions, except for Newfoundland and Labrador, nobody on income security in the country is actually at the poverty line or better. Rule number one. Number two, you have made some changes in the Yukon, and it may be too soon to evaluate how they're going, but my own sense is that the 2008 Social Assistance Review Package has in it some important innovations, which is very much to the credit of your government and your assembly and your larger community. We have huge disincentives now that keep people on welfare. I've often made the case that the social safety net is not strong enough to support, and it sure ain't strong enough to lift people, but it sure is strong enough to entangle and depress. Nobody intended that to be the case. Nobody sat up and said, how do we make welfare a trap? Nobody decided to do that, but that's where we now are. So the mere notion that you will allow, I think, income security recipients to earn and keep $2 for every $4 that they might earn is an important step ahead, which other jurisdictions, quite frankly, haven't had the courage to do. That's to your credit.